Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm glad to see so many people. And I promise you I'm going to leave you with some hope and positive message, not just the downer stuff that I'm so well known for, okay? Our democracy is in very, very deep trouble. Can you hear me in the back, by the way? Okay. Donald Trump is not the disease. He is the symptom. It's terribly important to understand that he is the symptom, not the disease. And if we're going to fix this and we're going to get this manifestly unqualified criminal out of the White House, we have to do some work. We've got to diagnose the real underlying problem. Now, I've been giving talks like this now since the beginning of last week when the book was published. And the questions I get, particularly last night at the library in Baltimore, where I had an audience about this size, tell me something very important. The same thing that happens on the radio shows I do where people call in. Americans have a pretty good idea of the chaos and the palace intrigues in the Trump White House. Journalists are actually doing a much better job of covering what's going on in the White House than I anticipated, partly because even though Donald Trump is all about loyalty to Donald, there are all sorts of people eager to leak who are in there not as close allies as his, and who want to position themselves for the future with journalists, people whose names you're never going to see in print. That's not the story that matters. It doesn't matter. It's entertaining. It's easy to read. I encourage you, read Michael Wolff's book, not least because it verifies what was in the book I was last here to speak about, The Making of Donald Trump. But, it's a good read. He's an excellent gossip reporter. But that's not what happens that affects your lives, your children's lives. If you're my age, your grandchildren's, and for all I know, maybe there are great-grandchildren on the way at this point. It is important that we understand what the Trump administration is doing. And it's not Donald personally doing this. Donald's a lazy guy. We all know he works about 4 hours a day. He said when he was running, I'm never going to leave the White House. There's so much to do. I'll never leave the White House. I'm never going to see my golf courses. Of course, he spends 1/3 of his time at his properties. It's the people he brought in. And Steve Bannon put it best. Steve Bannon said, I'm a Leninist. That is, I'm someone who wants to destroy the existing order. Many of these people, although they certainly wouldn't put it in these terms, hate the United States of America. They hate it. They hate the fact that there are people of color in this country, that there are people of a different religion in this country, that there are people who are not interested in worshiping the rich and trying to get rich and certainly don't want to be taxed to subsidize the rich. And we need to recognize that. In the same vein, we have a president of the United States who is not a loyal citizen. If you go back after you go home tonight, or sometime in the next few days, go to the internet and look at the email that Rob Goldstone, the PR guy, sent to Donald Trump Jr. It's on the New York Times website, among other places. And you want to read it carefully, because the journalists who wrote about it at the time, who are very good reporters, but they're not investigative reporters, they're politics reporters, did not parse the sentences in there. And the fourth sentence of this email makes it clear that there was an ongoing conspiracy. Collusion is not a crime. I don't care about collusion. I care about conspiracies. There was an ongoing conspiracy between the Kremlin and the Trump administration. It says in the fourth line, and you can check the exact language when you get home, as part of Russia's efforts to help. That's not a, hi, would you like to get together and see if we might do something for you? That's, we're already sleeping together. You want to try something new? Well, Donald Trump has been involved with the Russians back to 1983. He has worked very hard to suppress a lawsuit about a $250 million tax fraud, which he authorized. And in fact, DCReport.org, the nonprofit news service that my friends and I started as a volunteer project, we're trying to raise money for, DC Report is in court trying to get access to some of the documents in this case that have been sealed, because Trump has been incredibly successful in hiding the record of his conduct. So when Trump came to the White House, the people he brought with him Michael Flynn, confessed felon, convict. Steve Bannon, a whole bunch of other people brought with them this team that I call Team Trump. And in the federal agencies, it's not just the incompetent, unqualified, anti to their oath of office cabinet secretaries who matter. It's not just Scott Pruitt who wants to destroy the EPA and Betsy DeVos who's completely unqualified. It's the people that came with them that I call political termites. And they have been loosed into the structure of our government, and they are damaging our government. For example, they have stopped posting notices of worker deaths. About 4,800 people a year die on the job. And some of these are just accidents nobody could have predicted. You could follow the best practices and they're going to happen anyway. But many of them are the result of the fact that, surprise, surprise, while some employers, most employers, try or do a good job, there are some who they just don't care. There are employers who have a record of time after time. They have workers who are unnecessarily maimed or killed. The records of those aren't there anymore. They're not putting them up. They're fighting giving away the statistical information that we need to understand what they're doing. And the Labor Department's actions in this area are far from unique. I asked the federal government, under an agency Trump just took control of, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which has recovered multiples of its budget, for a copy of a receipt. I wanted to see evidence that a huge fine supposedly paid by one of the banks was actually paid. You know, lots of the fines you read about in the newspapers by criminals never get paid. They delayed, they were slow, they got back and sent me a lot of irrelevant stuff, and I said, gee, you know, thanks for all this information that's already on your internet, but I just want proof of payment, a receipt, a notice. You clearly, no one would make, you know, a payment in the hundreds of millions of dollars without having gotten a receipt for it. And they said, well, you'll have to file a Freedom of Information Act request. This is the kind of administration we have. When Donald Trump took the oath of office to faithfully execute the laws and to be loyal to the United States of America, he then got in a motorcade to go to the White House. There's a TV camera, a pool camera, in a truck right in front that looks square down the middle. The presidential limousine, known as the Beast, stopped. And it stopped at a place where the family got out. They spent 2 minutes walking around. And what the cameras didn't tell you was where they stopped. Not one of the television networks mentioned where did they stop. They stopped in front of the Trump International Hotel, whose lease says no federal employee can be involved in that lease. And you know what? We have jointly an employee named Donald J. Trump. He's our employee. Well, the reason he did that was, you know, a lot of people who voted for him would be meaningless, even if the camera had panned to show the hotel. But if you're an emissary of the government of Kuwait seeking a favor from Donald Trump, if you're an oil baron or a coal company or anybody else who wants a favor from the Trump administration, you got the message. And that hotel, which Trump had in filings, the Trump Organization filings, had predicted will lose money in its first year, is making money hand over fist. Anybody here in the bar business? Well, they're taking in at the bar $68,000 a night. Cocktails start at $36. Steaks start at $60. They're making money hand over fist because if you want something from the Trump administration, what he made clear is you will pay me tribute. You'll sign up to join Mar-a-Lago where he doubled the admission price. But worse than that are these appointees that they've put in place who are totally unqualified and in many cases enemies of the agencies they represent. Donald Trump's administration is turning America into what the ancient Greeks called a kakistocracy. That is a government of the worst people, the most venal, unqualified, criminal elements around. The worst people. This isn't